I am a solo hobbyist game developer with a full-time job, but that wasn't always the case. Last year I actually quit my job and spent almost the entire year as a full-time indie developer. Let me tell you, it was one of the best years of my life. But all good things must come to an end, especially once the bills come due. So over the past year, I've actually had a full-time job again, which means I had to figure out how to transform my full-time dev process into something that would still work for hobbyist game development. Hey there, I'm Aramis, and let me tell you, it was not an easy transition for me to make. Now, I think that's because there's fundamentally two challenges we face as hobbyist game developers. One, our time, and two, our energy. And at various points over the past year, either or both of those things have thrown giant wrenches into my game dev process, which would ultimately stall out any progress I was making on my game Chess Survivors. But don't worry, I did eventually get Chess Survivors fully released on Steam back in August, but getting there from early access was not always smooth sailing. And I think that's the honest truth here. Life goes in cycles. Some weeks you'll be crushing it, feeling great, on top of the world, nothing can slow you down. And then other weeks you're gonna feel burnt out, struggling to get up in the morning, mentally exhausted after your shift, and the very last thing you wanna do is work on your game. And that's okay. I think that's the honest reality of life and a pretty pragmatic way to think about game development as a hobby. And this was the first big lesson I learned about my process as a hobbyist game developer. I need to approach my practice with the right mindset and the correct expectations for the realistic amount of progress I can make on my games. Now, when I was a full-time game dev, I would almost accidentally spend 50 to 60 hours a week working on my games. But for me, as a hobbyist dev now, let me tell you, it's a pretty good week if I get 5, maybe 10 hours of good work in during a week. So with all that limited time, how do I actually plan out my work? For me, the trick I've learned over the last year is to actually write down the next 2 to 3 bite-sized, teeny tiny things I want to work on. Now, I've tried planning out a whole to-do board with features and milestones, and frankly for me, I find that becomes a bit overwhelming when I actually sit down to work on my games. So surprisingly, I've actually had a lot of success just simply using this whiteboard for my to-do list. Now, this lives next to my desk, and so other than just keeping track of what I want to work on next, it does one really important thing. Whenever I see it, I briefly switch into game dev mode, and I think about my games or what I want to work on next. So even if I don't actually work on my game during a given day, I've at least thought about it a few times. Then when it does come time to sit down for my next game dev session, I typically have a pretty good idea of exactly how I want to implement that next feature, and I find more often than not, I'm able to absolutely crush that to-do list. And I'm honestly a bit frustrated by how simple yet effective this method of planning has been for me. I suggest you experiment around as well with a few different methodologies, and maybe something stupidly simple like this will also work for you. Now that we've tackled the challenge of managing our time and expectations, let's talk about the other major hurdle we face as hobbyist game developers, our energy. Having a job fundamentally costs us our time and our energy, because at the end of the day, we're trading those valuable resources to work on things we really don't want to be doing all for a paycheck, which is fine. But for me, that can lead to added stress, mental fatigue, and getting burnt out altogether. Not to mention if on top of all of that, you have your own personal issues you're working through. I certainly have my own burdens to bear. My energy level is a constant struggle for me, and the best way I know to manage it is to take care of myself both physically and mentally. And this is gonna look absolutely different for everybody. And if you're particularly struggling with your own mental health, I highly recommend therapy. I've had tremendous success with it myself, and I quite literally have seen it change my best friend's life. Over the years, I've learned I feel best when I simply work out a few times a week, eat a few healthier meals, and after I get a good night of sleep. There are a bunch of other little things I try and do here and there, but generally, things just go in cycles for me. So I've learned my true goal is to minimize the amount of time I'm in my lows and extend the amount of time I'm feeling good. I haven't shared this with you yet, but about 3 years ago, I quit drinking alcohol. And that one decision to remove that negative habit from my life really dramatically smoothed out my energy levels. Sure, I still have low points, but they're not nearly as low as when I drank regularly. I don't think it's a coincidence that becoming sober was around the same time I started spending more time making games. This hobby has given me so much joy and such a good creative outlet, and it's really grown to be something that I fundamentally consider a pillar of who I am. And I love that. So if you're struggling to learn how to develop games, it's worth taking a step back and thinking about adding some healthier habits to your normal daily routine, such as using Brilliant, the sponsor of this video. Brilliant offers a free, user-friendly, and interactive platform for learning various subjects including math, data science, artificial intelligence, and my personal favorite, computer science. With a continuously expanding library of over 1,000 guided lessons, Brilliant stands out. These lessons aren't your typical mundane sessions, they're packed full of interactive visuals that make learning engaging. I found this particularly unique approach significantly helped me learn faster, and I often found myself spending extra time on each lesson just simply playing around with their slick interactives. If you were interested in learning game development, I highly recommend starting with their Thinking in Code course, which will help you grasp how a computer interacts with code, and that's actually something our brains don't intuitively understand. So I like how Brilliant's lessons are conveniently bite-sized, which is, pardon the pun, truly brilliant, allowing me to progress at my own pace when I have a spare 5 or 10 minutes. To try everything Brilliant has to offer free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/Aramis or click on the link in the description. The first tuner view will get a 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. And I want to thank Brilliant for supporting both me and my game development journey. Thanks for watching. I've been Aramis. Have a great day.